Welcome to the Breaking Up with Naive podcast, where it's not heartbreak, it's a rebrand. I'm your host, Dr. Becky Rollerson. This is a place where my friends and I share our stories of heartbreak in life, combined with our testimonies of how being a Christ follower led us to surviving the heartbreak and to rebuilding healthy lives. While the stories shared here are relevant and true, it is important to note that I am not a trained counselor, not a trained mental health counselor, nor someone who assesses mental health. If you feel that you need help in that area, I encourage you to please seek medical guidance. The testimonies shared here on this podcast are intended to encourage and inspire other women to be less naive when it comes to Satan's ugly ways. With that, welcome to today's episode of Breaking Up with Naive. Hey there, listeners. Welcome to this episode of Breaking Up with Naive, where it's not heartbreak, it's a rebrand. So I have to admit that today's episode is going to be a little different than what you have heard from me. This is the testimony, or a part of the testimony, of my childhood best friend, Candi Newsom Hinson. This testimony and her life impacted me so significantly. And I was sitting here the other night and grieving her and thinking about how much I wish that she was here and that she would just love this podcast and that she would just be so happy that women's testimonies are being shared. And I thought, gosh, I wish I could just share hers. I wish she was here to interview. And then I remembered that she had recorded at least a part of her testimony for a video that she had done for her church. So I found that on YouTube, and I've been able to use some of today's technology and be able to record the audio from that interview and really from her sharing her testimony. And that is what you're about to hear. So I will admit that it is a little sad, and you're probably going to get teary-eyed because she does talk about the loss of her son, but I really want you to hear how she turned pain into purpose and what she did with that going forward. And I'll come back at the end after her testimony has been shared and add to the commentary. But again, this testimony meant so much to me. Romans 8:28, God works all things together for the good of those who love him. So with no further ado, here is her testimony.
Hi, I'm Candi Hinson, and God has called me to start a support group, a grief group for mothers, fathers who have lost their child. And why this has been on my heart is because I have a story to tell. Jacob was born August 5th, 2001. I was very excited when I became pregnant with Jacob. I had him 6.5 weeks early because my blood pressure decided to get high. And so I had a C-section. And so he was 3 pounds and 13 ounces, but he was doing really well. And we got to go home pretty soon after he was born. At 5 months, he started losing weight and not eating. So we took him to the doctor. He thought maybe a virus, but he wanted to admit him to the hospital, and that scared me to death because this mother instinct of mine knew it was something wrong, something really wrong. So we went there, and the doctor was doing every test they could, and then that same doctor was just rubbed his head and felt his soft spot was firm. And as he was doing that, he's like, "What is wrong with you, Jacob?" And he felt that. He said, has that soft spot been that firm? And I said, I don't know. And they did a scan on his head, and immediately they came back and said he's got a large tumor on his brain. This brain tumor was very aggressive. The people at Shands gave him little to no chance to live. This tumor was pretty new, as far as there's not a lot of information about it. Shands told us to basically take him home on hospice, and I couldn't give up, so we didn't. We researched and we took him to St. Jude's Children's Hospital in Memphis. We still had a 2% chance of living. That was what they said. When we got there, things were a lot worse than we first knew. He had a tumor in his left kidney. It had to be removed. And this is after, in Shands, he had 2 major debulking of his tumor. So they had to go in twice to remove the massive tumor that had grown. So in Memphis, we did the kidney removal, and then the cancer is so aggressive that he also had a spot in his spine. The doctors kept on wanting to treat, and I was willing to do the chemo. Some people asked me how I handled the news, and I guess my first response, shock. And yes, I prayed to God. We prayed to God. Was there feelings of, why is this happening? Of course. But we just had to continue to pray, because we knew it's not in our hands. And Jacob was sick for 2 years. The most difficult days with Jacob was when he was hurting, because I couldn't fix it, and the mama's supposed to fix everything, but I couldn't. During the 2 years, I did not work. Jacob was my full job, and I don't regret that for one single bit. There was just no way to work. My husband at the time worked and drove back and forth. Thankfully, there was resources that allowed us to live right next to the hospital, provided us food, transportation. Through this process, when Jacob was diagnosed, immediately I have like the best friends in the whole wide world. They were there. So many people around this community gave money. It's unbelievable. I can never thank them enough, because I survived because they gave money to our terrible situation. I don't know what I would have done without their help. I mean, they helped so much from Bonifay, and then God is awesome, because I met like some wonderful, wonderful people that were, going through the same things that I was at St. Jude. I still talk to them all the time. God just put everything in place for me. And then there was a time where they scanned him and said that he was cancer-free. So we then came home to Bonifay and celebrated. We knew there was always a possibility it could come back, because this was an aggressive tumor. He was thriving, getting chunky, and then we had to do follow-up appointments. So when we went for the follow-up, they said that he would need radiation. So he had to go through radiation on his spine. Then we went back again they let us go home back to Bonifay after that, the radiation. And when we went back, the cancer had spread everywhere. And I knew that if that's what they said, we were done. He had been through enough. I felt bad putting him through that, but I felt like that was our only choice to keep him here. So we put him on hospice, and 2 weeks later, on January 30th, 2004, he passed away with just me and his daddy. And he looked up, and I think he was seeing heaven. Then he closed his eyes. He wasn't hurting. So I just thank God he doesn't have to worry about going to any doctors anymore. He doesn't have to hurt. And I'll see him again. I can definitely remember having to pick out a casket for him. Nothing you want to do for anybody, but especially your child. That was kind of rough. But we had everything down to a video showing his life. And at the funeral, we played that. And I honestly can't remember that much about the funeral. Just totally can't. So after Jacob passed away, basically me and my husband didn't grieve the same way. And his idea of grieving was really didn't want to see any pictures of Jacob, kind of wanted to run and ignore. And I can understand that. I wanted pictures up. I wanted to talk about it. And a marriage doesn't work when you're two opposites when it comes to losing a child. And everybody grieves so differently. And that's why I think it's so important to talk to people who have been in your shoes. It might not be the same way somebody passed away, but losing a child is something you're never supposed to do. So I think a grief support for those that have lost their children, no matter if it's been 20 years, 10 years, a week ago, I don't care. You're always going to grieve your child until you're with them again. People are hurting all over our community due to grief. It has hit so many families here, especially lately with COVID. We are starting a grief support group for parents who have lost children.
And there you have it. Candi's words and her testimony straight from her. So I'm just so thankful that this was recorded by her before she passed away. And the last thing she said there is that they're going to start a support group for parents who have lost children. And boy, did she do that. She and her church family and some other people did indeed start a support group. And it is a Christian support group at her church. And it's actually a network of support groups. And I ended up co-facilitating that support group at my church the last year, mostly because I went through the curriculum that Candi used to facilitate because I needed it for my own loss of her. And I just am so proud of her. And on this end of things, I recognize what her grief must have felt like. And even though I was one of her best friends and spent so much time with her and heard her talk about these things, I don't know that I ever understood the significance of it until after she passed away. But I love the part when she talks about that she would see him again one day. She knew she would see Jacob again one day. And after this loss, she did go on to end up with a wonderful husband, had a bonus son, and then they had a daughter. And she was a very happy person. God replaced everything that had been lost in her life. And it just reminds me so much of the testimony of Lot in the Old Testament of the Bible, where all of those things were taken from him, his family, his belongings, his children, his spouse. But God did indeed restore those, not necessarily the same people and the same material possessions, but God restored everything that had been removed from Lot's life. And I often thought Candi got that Cinderella story at the end. And so I just think it's such a beautiful testimony. Her life was beautiful. And I just really wanted to share because she was such a powerful, godly woman. And all of those painful experiences took her to a place where I don't know that I will ever be as close to God as she was. And maybe I will, but I just meant that in the way to say that she was just such a beautiful spirit. And she was a spiritual leader in my life, especially for the last year or two before she passed away. So I was so excited knowing that she got to see Jacob. And as much as things are painful, this is why I believe the Lord has our best interests at heart, and he rescued her from the sin of this earth. So again, a little different podcast episode than maybe you're used to hearing from me, and one that I also spontaneously decided to do, but that I'm also honored to do. So thank you for listening today. And again, just remember, it's not heartbreak. It is truly a rebrand in Christ. All right, until next time. Thank you for joining us on today's episode of Breaking Up with Naive. It's not a heartbreak, it's a rebrand.